Hi, and welcome to the third part of my video series on the theory of learning and methodology. In the first two videos, I was talking about the fact that having a goal for each lesson is very important in order to have a good lesson. And today I will actually talk about how you can set the goals for a lesson. In the end, I was told at the beginning of my career as a teacher that I will be judged by the progress that my students will make during the lesson, by people who actually had to assess my ability as a teacher, but also by my students, because in the end they will go home and tell their parents, today we didn't learn anything. Or they will go home and the parents will ask them, what did you learn today? And if they cannot say, oh, today I learned this and that in my chemistry lesson, I probably didn't do a good job, right? So today it will be about setting goals so that you actually can plan your lessons towards that goal so that students can learn something or improve on something during that lesson. Before we can talk about which goal we would like to set for each lesson, we have to define what you can actually, or what you need to be a good grappler, or what you need to have to be a good grappler. There are basically four things that I think are the most important. You need some skills. I will talk about that later. What exactly I mean by that. Physical abilities, and of course concepts and techniques. I will try to reduce this a little bit further because there is a debate going on about what's best. Should we first teach techniques and then later add in concepts, or should we have concepts first and then later techniques? Starting with techniques is the traditional way. It is some kind of a step-by-step approach towards one technique, like any kind of sweep. They are usually the basis of a curriculum. You have this, for your first stripe you need this and that sweep. For your blue belt you have to know these 5 sweeps, and so on and so forth. Usually that is easy to copy, and it has the problem is that you cannot apply them at any time in any place. So they're rather specific. The good thing is techniques can be taught quite easily because you don't have to have much knowledge about grappling. You just have to know this technique. You then can teach this technique step by step, and in the end people can repeat that pattern and they have learned that technique, at least the motor skill behind that technique. That's why that's one of my assumptions, that this is the reason why people tend to teach technique, and especially as a beginner. In a teaching career, they rather tend to teach technique because it's easier. On the other hand, you have concepts. Concepts are the underlying principles. So it is a more holistic approach, which means that you try to fit different things together. I would describe it as the new school approach, whereas the technique approach is the old school approach. Concepts can be applied to many different situations, but that's also what makes it a bit difficult, because there are so many possibilities to apply the concepts that it gets difficult to pick the right moment to use the concept. In general, concepts are a bit more difficult to teach because you have to have a broader understanding of grappling to actually narrow it down enough so that you can have a concept that is easy to understand. So in the end, technique and concept are two sides of one medal. You can either go by teaching lots of techniques, like 20 different sweeps, and then help your students to understand what the concept behind all the sweeps are, and then you can combine them and narrow it down to the concepts that you use in your academy to teach sweeps. On the other hand, you could also go by teaching a concept first. What do you need to do to sweep somebody? And then further develop different techniques from this concept, depending on what the opponent does. In the end, I would like to combine the two under the term knowledge, because it doesn't matter if you know lots of techniques or lots of concepts or both. In the end, it's just knowledge. You still will have to apply it. Although concepts might be a bit more closer to this application than technique, at least it seems at first, because technique is applied concept at a very specific point in time in a very specific circumstances. So I guess both is very valuable in your teaching toolkit. So now we have three things that you need to be a good grappler: knowledge, grappling skills, and physical abilities. I would like to focus on knowledge and grappling skills in this video series, because physical abilities is something that is important at the very beginning, where you teach people to forward roll and what they can actually do with their limbs, and things like proprioception need to be improved. But it becomes less and less important the more advanced the students are. I think that for the most part of your grappling career, it is more important to improve your grappling skills and knowledge than it is to improve your physical abilities. In the end, we all get older, and so our physical abilities should not be the number one thing to rely on when we grapple with somebody. It is more like the knowledge and the skill that should be very important. So now that we know what we need to be a good grappler, we have to become a good grappler. There are people who are born good grapplers, or they are simply very, very talented, all right? But in the end, we are teaching average Joes and Janes who maybe have never seen anything like that. They have maybe had some experience in judo or in other fighting arts, or they have done different sports. So in the end, to help them to become a good grappler, because that's what they come to you for mainly, you should keep in mind that you have to teach them knowledge. So you have to help them to collect techniques and concepts, and also knowledge about body mechanics and stuff like that, that helps them to actually understand why the techniques work. And on the other hand, you need to teach them the necessary grappling skills, and that would be the application of techniques and concepts against resisting partners with different levels of complexity. So that's the two extremes, right? You have knowledge and you have skill, or it's not two extremes, but they complement each other. And when you really want to help people to become a good grappler, you also have to teach them learning skills and methodical skills that help them to actually plan and evaluate their own learning process. But for this video, I will just focus on knowledge and grappling skill. And I will focus on the learning skills later, when I will talk about drilling and how to actually improve your skills and knowledge while drilling. When talking about grappling skills, I would like to show what I'm working on right now. So this is not finished yet, and this is just something that I use at the moment. So we have defensive skills. That would be something like survival, escapes, and defense. Survival are things like turtle, panda, hawking, running man, like Preet Mikkelsen is talking about quite a lot. Escapes is positional escapes. So you want to go from one position to a better position, but also escaping submissions. And then you have defense, that would be not getting into too bad of a position, and something like guard retention or takedown defense. Then you have offensive skills, that would be how to control an opponent, something like grip fighting, pressure, all that. Then you have transitions, so how do you transition from one dominant position into another dominant position without giving up too much space and without being off balanced. And then of course submission, so how do you attack, how do you actually submit your opponent. The third part is the most experimental part of my ideas. That's counter-offensive. It is something that goes along the lines with one of John Dana's last videos, where he talked about attacking from the back or something like that. I have not watched that yet, but it seems to be closely related to what I am thinking about. In the end, what do we do with all that when we try to plan a lesson? So when you want to plan a lesson, you have, as I mentioned in a video before, you have to have a look at where is that lesson in a longer training cycle. Because you cannot put all the information and all the skill development into one lesson. That's impossible. You have to narrow it down and use just some of the things you would like to teach somebody. For example, when we talk about half guard, there we have how you position your body, that you don't want to, when we talk about half guard bottom, you have to talk about how you want to position your body, that you don't want to be flat. How do you put your head? Where do you put your head? Where do you put your right hand? Where do you put your left hand? What do you do with your legs? How can you off balance somebody? What is about a grip fighting? So there are lots of things that you have to explain to people or introduce people to, and they have then to develop that. Just because you tell them that it exists and what would be a good idea to do in that in a certain scenario doesn't mean they can actually apply it. So they need time to work on that these things, so that they learn how to apply the knowledge. To do that, one should have in mind that it is boring to do the same over and over again, so we need some variation. And this variation also helps to start with lots of instruction at the beginning, maybe with a short phase of creativity and exploration. If you don't give away the correct solution, so to speak, at the beginning, you can have people experiment with the position of half guard and explore what is good and what is bad, and then further try to develop the ideas they come up with. That would be like a concept approach. Or you can really instruct them to do certain things. So introduce them to underhook is a good idea in a half guard if done correctly. Or preventing the crossface is a good idea, something like that. So you tell them about new things, so you help them to expand their knowledge in that position. The more knowledge they have, or with the new knowledge, they need to apply that new knowledge, and they have to apply one thing after the other. And then when they try to do a certain technique, for example, they then increase the speed, maybe they increase the intensity, then they can increase the complexity by not just working on the head positioning, but also on the legs, and then maybe on the legs and arms at the same time, so that they can actually apply the things they just got to know about, and then by applying more and more things over a certain amount of time with increasing intensity, speed, and complexity, they then develop the skills necessary in a certain position, for example. So while and the more they know, the less instruction they need, the more they have to find out what works for them. You can tell them what the principles are, but then they have to find out how exactly they have to apply them, which is mainly influenced by their body, but also by who they are rolling with. So that's again another skill that they have to develop then. So in the end, the things I just said focus mainly on the middle part of a lesson. I would like to leave out the warm-up and the lead-in. I will address that in the following video. But the learning and the skill development, that is what happens, or what you are influencing in the main part or the middle part of a lesson. So at the beginning, you somehow introduce new knowledge to them, either by telling them or making them find out that it exists, that this problem or problem exists, and then they have to drill around that problem and try to find solutions, or you give them solutions that they have to drill and to have to find out how it fits for them, and if it fits their game. They get some feedback on that and do that over and over again with different partners who have different ways of resisting. And in the end, there's rolling. Rolling is something where you can also learn, but it is something where you have to be aware of that you can learn while rolling. It is not just testing, it can be testing, and it should be testing from time to time, but rolling should be a more open and more complex way of learning. So people should either consciously or unconsciously try to develop skills in the time they have to roll. So again, the most important part is in the middle, and that is getting new knowledge, drilling the knowledge, so getting some reaction about what you try to do, getting feedback, either by realizing it doesn't work or somebody telling you it doesn't work, and then you check your knowledge. Did you really understand it properly? Maybe you have to change it to adapt it to what you just found out, and then you drill it again. So you have this cycle of you get to know about something, you test it, you evaluate it, you find out about it, and then you try to make it even better, and then you drill it again, you find out did it work or did it not work, and then you make the necessary changes, and you do that over and over again. That is the process of learning. You fail, you evaluate, and you try to do it differently, and then you finally will succeed in getting better. You will never be perfect, but you will definitely get better by that. If you do it in a circle, you will be running circles, and maybe you will never really get better. That is why a spiral would be best to explain this. So you have something that you repeatedly try and evaluate, and by doing that you move from a lower level to another level to another level, and you're going always up towards more competent and better grappler. This is something that can be done within one drill. This is something that holds also true for within one lesson, for a training cycle, for a year, and in the end, this is what your grappling life looks like. at the beginning of half guard, you just knew that you have to have one of your opponent's legs between your legs, and that's half guard. And later, I don't know what I will know about the half guard when I be black belt, but I assume that I will know more than I do now as a purple belt. So, and if I don't know more, I will at least be better at applying the things I already know, because I will have spend more time in that position and drilled and failed more of the different aspects of the half guard. So when you change something in your or when you try to teach something, you cannot improve everything at the same time. The more advanced people are, the more they might be able to have in mind when fighting and when rolling. But if you really want to improve a certain aspect, then you have to look at it in isolation. And then when you have looked at it in isolation, you then have to put it back into context, and then you have to reevaluate if the solution you found in isolation actually hold up in a complex situation where you have a full fight with a resisting partner who does not want to cooperate with you. Changing one thing at a time and trying to make one thing a little bit better at a time will in the end lead to make a better grappler out of the person that is in your lesson. So how do you decide on which of the parts do you want to make the goal of your lesson, or you would like to create your lesson around? That's a topic for the next video, because I think that this is probably the most difficult part to do. Not just picking a goal, but actually picking a goal that can be achieved within one lesson. And I guess the other things remain the same. So see you next time.